Happening in a matter of hours, the Senate Judiciary Committee set to hold its first hearing over the alleged cover-up of former President Joe Biden's mental decline, a probe that is expected to address growing concerns over who was actually running our country.
Florida Senator Ashley Moody will be at that hearing today, and she joins us now. Senator, good morning to you. So let's go to the witness list first. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer is going to be testifying. A former Trump administration official Theodore Wold, as well as John Harrison, who is a law professor at the University of Virginia. So why were they selected to talk about Joe Biden's mental decline?
Well, look, I think this is the first congressional hearing to probe not just what we're finding out in terms of evidence of decline, but evidence of deceit. And what these witnesses will do will kind of set the stage for what would we expect from a commander-in-chief who is operating at full capacity? What should we have expected on those surrounding him? What would they have known? Of course, you know, Sean Spicer worked in the White House. And to what extent did the media participate in this cover-up? You know, it is no longer in doubt whether or not the president was operating in a way that we would expect from a commander-in-chief. We know that there was evidence of decline, and not just what we were watching play out on television in terms of mixing up names of foreign national leaders, but you know, we now know that people were limiting his access to the cabinet, limiting the amount of time he was working. I mean, that is a dangerous, dangerous state to be in when you have policies that are unfolding that are creating a very dangerous national security here in our own country. And so those things are playing out right now. We're uncovering the evidence of that. And this congressional hearing is meant to just be a first inquiry into whether or not handlers were at the helm, or whether or not it was, in fact, Biden operating the country.
Going back to these witnesses, that's quite a burn to the Democrats, being like, OK, we're going to show you an example of how a president is supposed to act, and our example is going to be Donald Trump, supported by witnesses who worked under Donald Trump. The Democrats are not going to like that, and it turns out, Senator, your colleagues on the other side of the aisle really just don't like the hearing in total. Take a listen.
We have so many important topics to consider, and that is a totally political undertaking by several of my colleagues. It is a waste of this committee's time.
OK, on that point of waste of time, to prevent it from ultimately being a waste of time in total, will anyone ultimately be held responsible with actual consequences if they are proven to have been complicit in the Joe Biden mental decline cover-up?
I can think of no more important topic right now than when we're uncovering evidence that this president may not have understood exactly what was going on. And remember, as Attorney General, I kept pointing out how radical these things that were being pushed out of the White House. I mean, they went against things that Democrats and Republicans had agreed upon as long as our country has been a country. And when you have those kinds of policies coming out, I mean, look at what they just announced yesterday. 0 people pushed into the interior of this country that have come over our border in a month. Compare that to the height of the Biden administration when they had lost all control. They were talking about losing control of the border, having to step back and let everybody flow in. They actually had quotas to push more people into the interior. It was hundreds of thousands of people a month. We're now at 0. There was a derelict of duty, and whether that was intentional by this president or whether that was a lack of his ability to run the country, I think the latter is probably true. And whether or not he had these radical handlers around him covering it up, that has to be of great importance to this country, because let's face it, we are the greatest country on this earth. We set the stage for relations and security for the rest of the world. You cannot have a president that is asleep at the wheel, and certainly those that fostered that and allowed that to happen have to be held accountable.
Yes, Senator, it's a great point. Tom Homan posted in the last 24 hours, the Border Patrol encountered a total of 95 illegal aliens across the entire southern border. That is the lowest number ever recorded. Glad you brought that up, because that is a notable post to get to. Senator Ashley Moody, thank you so much for joining us ahead of your very busy day. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.